Hey team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine war news update. I don't understand. I've been through different time zones today. I don't understand really what date it is and what number of video this is. It's late in the day in the UK. I have got back safely, as you can see, which is awesome. We had a lovely Chinese, some wine. My partner Helen, she's fallen asleep already because she had to get up at I think 3 this morning, maybe 4, to take my boy Oscar ice skating. So she's exhausted. I'm pretty knackered. But what happens, just to give you a bit of an insight into like why I feel I have to do these videos every day, is because I build up a bank of stuff I want to talk about. And I guess it's a sunk cost fallacy for me. And if I don't do it on the day, then the next day just adds a load to it. And then the stuff I've got from the day before is kind of not relevant. And so I feel what a waste of time compiling all that. And I really want to talk about it, all that. And I have to get it. I don't know. It's kind of routine, just the way my brain works. I have to get it out. So I have to purge my brain of the stuff I've collected. And so I've collected this stuff today. If I don't do it now, then it will just never be talked about. So that's why I'm doing this now, and I'll do one tomorrow, although tomorrow's going to be a very busy day for me. Anyway, whatever. Right. So today's statistics from earlier today, obviously this morning, the Ukrainian General Staff figures, caveat supply, you can find them in the description to the video below, are pretty phenomenal yet again. 1,210 personnel lost. That is just a huge number. 23 tanks is a huge number of tanks, well over the average. 39 APVs is massive. 21 artillery systems, obviously not as big as the huge numbers posted, the record numbers posted in the last few days, but still significant. 25 vehicles and fuel tanks and 4 pieces of special equipment. So that is a challenging day for the Russians. Now, the question, as always, is, well, has it been equally as challenging for the Ukrainians? Now, what we can probably say is that the Ukrainian personnel losses will be high. I don't know how high. I don't know less, same, more, what the kind of proportions either way are, but they will be high for the Ukrainians. We know they're finding it tough in a number of places on the front line, but the equipment losses will be nowhere near what the Russians are, because the Ukrainians, A, don't have as much equipment, and B, probably because of A, don't commit them in the same way that the Russians do. So they are keeping them back. They use them more for offensives. They're not really on the offensive at the moment, so they aren't losing those pieces of equipment where the Russians are. And we can justify that by looking at stuff like this. Now, we have heard from Ukrainian commanders on the front line in Avdiivka saying that there has been record days of Russian losses. The Ukrainians have absolutely decimated Russian equipment in and around Avdiivka, particularly. So that is a claim. Now the question is, we see these daily statistics from the General Staff. Are these accurate? We hear the claims from the generals or commanders. Are they accurate? Well, actually, claim from the General Staff and a claim from commanders is some kind of confirmation, but it could be the same kind of source. But nonetheless, the more data points, the better. And then we see confirmed losses here. Now, Andrew Perpetua says, here are the losses I could identify for yesterday, not today, as in these are like 2 days ago, essentially. There are just so many. I mean, he was talking about how he's got so many videos still to look at. There's just so many losses he can't keep up. So then this leads us to believe that the General Staff and the Ukrainian command structure in their claims appear to be truthful. Like, we appear to be justified in believing them. Okay, Ukrainian losses here. I mean, goodness me, what is the ratio there? I don't know, 6-1, something like that. Ukrainians have lost some howitzers, M109, a couple of them, M777, and then some, whatever else, nothing particularly high value. Unknown T-72 could be from either side there. We go to the Russian losses. There's an anti-drone electronic warfare system, a command and control truck. That's going to be high value. It's not just the value of replacing these vehicles, it's the information lost within them and possibly the personnel as well. So that command truck was full. It's going to be full with commanders, with expertise, with knowledge. It's going to be full of equipment that's really expensive, but it's the knowledge in that equipment too that might not be replaceable. So those kind of targets, those kind of pieces of equipment that are lost are going to be high value in terms of money and other aspects as well. So surveillance and comms equipment, recovery vehicle, Prem 1, artillery systems, a kind of range of artillery there, and then a huge number of tanks for visually confirmed losses. And then we go back to the general staff figures, 23 tanks. Okay, well, here we have, goodness me, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20 tanks there, pretty much. So there you go. General staff figures, looking pretty accurate. Right, we have 3 T90Ms. 4 T90Ms. Goodness me, I think the percentage of T90Ms that have now been taken out will be very high, because I'm fairly sure when I reported on T90Ms a couple of months ago, we were like over 40% of the T90Ms. I think they only had 100, and of that particular variant, the M, the T90M, that's a breakthrough tank. There's got to be something like 60% of them taken out now, or I'll be interested to see the stats there. But that's high value losses here. T72s, T80s, other tanks. Just a lot of tanks lost. Infantry fighting vehicles, we've got BMP 2s, 3s, 1s, a couple of at least one BMP 1 there. And for the APCs, a lot of NTLBs, the older kind of APCs there, and a BTR thrown in, and then fuel trucks and civilian vehicles and whatnot. So really much higher value of equipment lost for the Russians than the Ukrainians by a large margin. Okay, interesting that recently the US has estimated losses again, and it's pretty much the same losses as they estimated last time, if I'm remembering correctly. So they say 60,000 have been killed, 300,000 wounded, amounting to about 400,300 wounded and killed. A lot of people saying this is a bit weird because that's the same number killed as you said last time, and this has been months and months on. What's going on? So some people questioning these. I'm not trying to cope as this is lower than some people are thinking, but this is certainly the lower end of the spectrum. But it turns out that I don't think it includes DPR and LPR and Wagner as well. So Wagner, I mean, if you included, I don't know, some people say like 25, 35,000 and so on and so forth. You start adding all these other figures into this. And will it include Nepalese? Will it include, Sierra Leoneans and so on and so forth? There is very good reason to think that 60,000 is well off there. You just start looking at some of these comments below. As someone says, it doesn't include Wagner and the militias in Donetsk and Luhansk. Indeed, that's another 100,000 KIA. So many people saying that figure is undercooked. Right, and to go towards that idea, here we have a reference to a CNN journalist. So mountains of Russian corpses shocked an American journalist. So American CNN military reporter Frederick Pleitgen talked about his last visit to the front. Quote, "What shocked me with the most was how many corpses there were lying around. There were dead Russians everywhere, body parts, machine parts. Nothing is being removed." Pleitgen was shocked by the number of casualties on the Russian side at the front. Quote, "We talk a lot about Ukrainian suffering, and this is of course true. But how many of his people Putin sends to death? I couldn't even imagine that everything would be as bad as it is now." This is one of the reasons why Ukrainians still have the morale, because they realise that they're actually holding many of them back. And this goes back to the figures that we see. It goes back to things like Avdiivka, and you think it's terrible for the Ukrainians. But as I keep saying, it will be many times worse for the Russians. These are either just victories that come at an insane cost, or Pyrrhic victories whereby the Russians take such losses in these victories that it leaves them vulnerable to be counterattacked and lose eventually. Like the victory is what causes them to lose, or the manner of the victory. We don't know, of course. That's a speculation, a prediction, a potential. Right, the third Specialised Brigade today set a record, as I've mentioned, and I mentioned this morning, I'm just going to repeat that, set a record for the destruction of manpower and enemy equipment in one day in Avdiivka, according to the commander of the terror unit in the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade. Let me tell you a good bedtime story from the Crimea direction. So this is moving away from Avdiivka and those horrendous losses for the Russians. Quote, more than 10 armoured vehicles, including 7 tanks and 1 TOS-1A, were simply devoured by combined FPV effort and artillery today in our direction. I tell you guys, FPV, so first-person view drones, are like effing piranhas. Most of the assault forces were still deep behind their lines when they had met their fate. Footage might come a bit later, says Null Reports. So, yeah, lots of evidence, and some people are asking whether this is a video. There is just an awful lot of video footage out there of Russian equipment being absolutely banjaxed. And when you look at the cause for these losses, for Andrew Perpetua's statistics here, you see Baba Yaga, that's a vampire drone. The octocopters are able to either work as relays for other drones, but can also just drop many more IEDs, and therefore they are particularly useful. They're more resistant to electronic warfare, and they often have thermal imaging as well. So Baba Yagas are proving to be pretty useful for the Ukrainians, but generally FPV drones are doing what they appear to be doing regularly here in this list. So yeah, the Ukrainians are causing the Russians some real harm there. But again, they are also taking losses. So a Ukrainian soldier told the story of his departure from the Zenit fortification. And I referenced this earlier, but I didn't have a translation. Here's an excerpt. It's not the whole thing. Quote, the evacuation did not arrive. The last group left the bunker, and this dialogue on the radio wounded us to our very core. Quote from the radio, wounded, there will be no evacuation? The wounded person says, Commander, no, there won't be. Leave the wounded men and burn everything. He did not know he was talking to a wounded man. There were at least 6 people left. And it was also difficult to read their message in the chat, their despair, their doom. It will always stay with us. Only the bravest die. So that sounds pretty horrific, being asked to leave the wounded to their own fate and to burn the place down. So, yeah. Ukrainian FPV drone operators destroyed the Russian Starlink terminal. Defense One reported that Russia purchased these terminals from Arab countries. So there is evidence of Starlinks getting blown up. There are claims that the Russians are using thousands of Starlinks on a front line. And all the while, my goodness, if you heard, I mean, I didn't listen to it live. I've seen excerpts of what Elon Musk said and I know I keep having a go at him, but jeepers creepers, the stuff he was saying on that live with David Sachs, who is his mate, who is an overt Russian propagandist, Vivek Ramaswamy, who is an overt Russian propagandist as far as I'm concerned, and all these people that he hangs around with, Elon Musk, and has these lives with, and then says we should not be giving any money to Ukraine, we should not be giving any assistance, they have no chance of beating Russia, blah 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 blah, and he says all this stuff, and then he's challenged on that and says to call me a Putin apologist is absurd. It's like, if you listen to what you are saying is not absurd. You are evidencing it every time you open your mouth. Anyway, goodness me, if any of my viewers are still fans of Elon Musk in the context of his thinking on this war, then you need to get your head checked. Like, he may be great at doing other things, but in this context, he sucks bad. Keep it together, Piers. Overnight, one Kh-59 cruise missile was shot down over the Sumy region, so that's only one missile. We see these, it seems to be sort of one a week, really, on average. I think it is 4 waves a month and about 100 missiles a month. They seem to send about 20, on average, 25 in each, like, major wave. they seem to only be producing 100 missiles a month and using them at the rates they're producing, unless they're like piling them up ready. The only sensible theory I've heard is that they are just stockpiling them ready for when the F-16s are positioned, and so they've got like hundreds of cruise missiles. I mean, to be honest, that's what I would do. I would keep some back for those airfields and take them out. But the problem is with missiles like that is if generally you're going to get pretty good idea when they have been fired. You've got active radars working on that, and you just get your planes up in the air while those cruise missiles, and indeed get them up in the air shooting down the cruise missiles if they're F-16. So anyway, between the 30th of December 2023 and 7th of February 2024, Russian forces attacked Ukraine with at least 24 North Korean origin ballistic missiles. Interfax Ukraine reported, citing Ukrainian prosecutor General Andrei Kostin. These attacks resulted in the death of 14 civilians and injuries to over 70 others. Now, 24 North Korean origin ballistic missiles. What is the international community doing about this? What's the UN doing about this? What's South Korea doing about this? This is an absolute shocker. And I'm sorry, there needs to be a really robust riposte to this. Yes, North Korea is sanctioned to the hilt, but this is unacceptable. Something has to be done about North Korea providing weapons to Russia directly. This is a nation that is sanctioned, and Russia themselves would be in violation of UN resolutions as far as I understand it. So what is the UN doing about Russia? Why are they still sitting on the Security Council? What is going on there? Right, Russia's airstrikes are absolutely hammering Avdiivka. I talked about that in my frontline update. We know about this, but there's plenty of footage of this, and they are absolutely flattening Avdiivka and surrounding areas. Now, the use of glide bombs in Avdiivka has increased. They are using up to 50 a day. That's on average. We have seen a day of 70 the other day. So these glide bombs are much worse than artillery. In addition, they are starting to use phosphorus intensively. The intensity is growing, and that's someone from the 3rd Assault Brigade again, Alexander Borodin. They are using incendiary munitions. That's a pretty horrific, or in this case phosphorus munitions, pretty horrific thing to use. You can understand why they're using it there. We've seen them use it in many similar scenarios, so it's completely unsurprising they'd be doing that in Avdiivka. And on the Ukrainian side of things, one place I know that's been struck in the last 24 hours is Rostov on Don, just to the southeastern area of Russia, as in if you go east of Mariupol, keep going on, you go through Taganrog and get to Rostov. So it's not too far away from Ukraine and does regularly get peppered with Ukrainian munitions. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. We're going to start with Alexei Navalny. As I've said, the opposition leader has died in prison. Many people blaming Putin, Putin blaming the West. Who knew? Now, some people on my threads have rightfully said that, don't be too sad about Navalny dying, because actually he's had some pretty egregious views on the war in Ukraine, on Ukraine in general, quite nationalistic, Russian nationalistic views. Now, this is somewhat true. However, it's worth noting that he has refined those views of late, and he's had quite changed views on the war and is dead against the war. Judging by his rhetoric over the last couple of years. And so, I think he was the leading political opponent to Vladimir Putin, obviously in prison, and was going to spend the rest of his life in prison, almost certainly. He's down for 30 years, or was down for 30 years. It's interesting that Nadezhdin, who is the opposition leader that some people think was some kind of puppet put in, but I don't know that that's the case. He was then invalidated from running because supposedly sort of 10% of his signatures weren't kosher. He's come out and very clearly defended Navalny today, and that's a really risky thing to do. So it makes me think again that Nadezhdin is possibly the real deal there, as far as being a genuine opponent, someone that really desires to run against Putin. Anyway, Zelensky said that obviously Navalny was killed by Putin, so he's not mincing his words there, like thousands of others who have been tortured. Okay, in Kazan, police forces have prevented people from laying flowers at the monument to victims of political repression in memory of Navalny, because, of course, killing political opponents and not allowing people to commemorate the death of a political opponent, even if it's not prima facie killing him, it's putting him in a position where he's likely going to die and treating him horrifically and poisoning him and attempting to kill him. That's what liberation looks like in Russia. Stopping people from laying flowers. That's what liberation, that's what liberty, that's what freedom looks like in Russia. Not liberation, freedom. This is Russian freedom. Of course it is. All you Russian trolls on the threads, that's what you're arguing for. Yeah, that's freedom, isn't it? Well done, you. Clever. Give yourself a pat on the back. Idiots. So, Anton Gerashchenko here says, Vyacheslav Volodin, head of the Russian parliament, accused Washington and Brussels. What they accused him of? Oh, the death of Navalny. Of course, they're responsible. Quote, the death of Navalny is a fault of Washington and Brussels. The cause will be determined by forensic experts and investigators. But when, without waiting for the results, accusations and statements from politicians and heads of unfriendly states around the sound like a broken record, the question must be answered first. Who benefits from Navalny's death today? Yeah, of course they did this. It is absolutely obvious, say the Russians. Those who have imposed more than 19,000 sanctions against Russia, aiming to tear its economy to shreds, those who are losing the war in Ukraine, those who do not, blah, 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 blah. It's just Russian projection and complete nonsense saying that, well, the West benefit more, therefore the West killed him. Yeah. Now, moving on from Navalny, and there'll be lots of fallout to that, no doubt. This is an interesting little video. This is from someone from Tatarstan who's basically complaining that they are getting really crap support from, well, quote, if we don't die from a bullet, we'll die from your humanitarian aid. And yes, that's the right way around. That's what he is saying. Russian soldiers complained that they received junk instead of a car at the front lines from Tatarstan region. So this is what they received. And the guy says, we have to repair it ourselves. He said, oh, the brake lights are working. What a miracle. At least something works on it. So literally nothing else appears to be working on this vehicle. And I was there meeting with Rick, the Ukrainian, the other day in the restaurant in Kyiv. And he was saying, look, I think you should get on board with doing NAFO 69th Sniffing Brigade, and it's $18,000, and you can raise, if you can raise that, then that's a SUV, that's a pickup for Ukrainians. And they've already done 300 of these. It's incredible what, and I wrote an article on crowdfunding the war, right? What people are doing in support of Ukraine, and that's kind of a good indication of where the moral calculation is. Who the good guys are, the Ukrainians. And that's why there are so many people around the world who are prepared to dig into their pockets to help fund the Ukrainians to fight against the naked aggression of the Russians. And the Russians, on the other hand, are getting the odd bit of humanitarian aid, but in this case, it's an absolute shocker of a vehicle that they say is more likely to get them killed than to help them. How can it transport the wounded? Think with your heads before acting. You only disgrace yourselves. You disgrace Tatarstan. And a right old go at them. And then the local Tatarstan authorities reacted with indignation and advised the soldier not to complain. Yeah, interesting. Moving on. Right. Oh, this is so... Right. Tucker Carlson, you know my views on him. He's just come out and said this basically on TV.
I went from amused to legitimately angry. So we were guessing what this would cost. Everybody hears from the United States buys groceries, and we didn't pay any attention to costs as we were just putting in the cart what we would actually eat over a week. And we all came in around $400, about $400. It was $104 US here.
It's interesting, like $400 a week. Like, for how many people? Is it just for himself? Like, I wouldn't spend that on me. $400, that's 300 odd quid a week. Now, it depends if you're talking about for a whole group of you, for a family of however many, then okay, things are changing. So I don't know what this is, too vague to be of any use, but it's a bit of a shocker.
And that's when you start to realize that ideology maybe doesn't matter as much as you thought, corruption. If you take people's standard of living and you tank it through filth and crime and inflation.
I mean, so people who say, make America great again, the reason they are able to say that is because they denigrate America so much that they just perceive it as absolute rubbish, so that they can fight for a change, for something new, for whoever, Trump or whatever it is. And then these people have the audacity to accuse people on the other end of the political spectrum to them as hating America. And actually, when you listen to the rhetoric of people like Tucker Carlson, if you didn't know any better, you'd think he absolutely despises America. He despises it. Just listen to what he says. This is what he thinks America is.
Corruption. If you take people's standard of living and you tank it through filth and crime and inflation, and they literally can't buy the groceries they want, at that point, maybe it matters less what you say or whether you're a good person or a bad person. You're wrecking people's lives in their country, and that's what our leaders have done to us. And coming to a...
So his leaders, American leaders, have wrecked the lives of people in their country. They can't afford to buy groceries because of filth and corruption and crime.
Russian grocery store, the heart of evil, and seeing what things cost and how people live, it will radicalize you.
So all he's saying is that a place where something is cheaper, finding that place where things are just cheaper will radicalize you, without understanding how economics works. Without understanding that the more money people have, the more you're going to get inflation. The more you're going to get inflation, the more things are going to cost, right? And that's a sign of an affluent society. There's all sorts of other stuff going on here. This is like, this guy is either a complete economics ignoramus and a vacuous douchebag, or he's insanely disingenuous, or both.
Against our leaders. That's how I feel anyway. Radicalized.
Oh, he's seen a bunch of groceries that this is just, again, we don't know what he's putting there. There's no verification here. And he's saying, it's $100 and it would have cost $400 back in the States. And therefore, the States is filthy and corrupt and criminal. Because these guys have got cheaper supermarkets, he says, as he goes to Aldi. I bet you, right, if you don't know Aldi, it's like your cheapest supermarket you can get in the UK. It's a German supermarket chain. You got Lidl and Aldi. They came to the UK probably 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more. And they kind of really mixed up the supermarket world in the UK. They're just your cheapest, right, essentially. Now, he's saying, look, it's $100 here, and we would spend $400 on this in the US. Yeah, but mate, Tucker Carlson, the last time you shopped in Aldi was, never, right? You ain't buying jack in Aldi in the US. And so it's just the whole premise, like, I always want to question everything, of course. It's just the nature of how I do things. But man, I just want to go to town on this. Now, someone else has gone to town on this. The Tucker Carlson grocery price video, Russia is so cheap you'll be radicalized, folks, is tragic and funny. My guy, the grocery bill you're rhapsodizing about is 70% of the median Russian weekly salary. This is what he's not talking about. He's not talking about, it's so expensive in the US. Yeah, and you get paid an absolute ton more. That's why. That's economics, mate. Ignore Tucker and the many accounts spamming the video. Russia is in a well-documented food affordability crisis. Even before Putin's disastrous invasion, Russians struggled to afford food. Now it's so bad, Putin felt compelled to apologise for skyrocketing egg prices. Tucker probably shouldn't retire to Russia and take a pension. With his fancy taste in groceries and as an average Russian pensioner, he'd be spending 43% of his monthly pension on a single grocery store trip. But actually, I wonder about the ballet he attended. So if you remember, he went to that ballet. You saw that ballet. The ballet, I placed Carlson in the best seat, VIP lower boxes. Tried and failed to find pricing for this ultra exclusive seat. Upcoming ballet cheapest LB zone starts above $1,000. So he's in the best. So probably multiples of an average Russian's monthly income. You have to hand it to Tucker Carlson. He's unironically refreshed George Bush's supermarket scanner moment for the 21st century. And this is a moment when George Bush Sr. Hit a supermarket and was amazed at the cost of stuff. It's just... So Phillips O'Brien says the populist right has probably overplayed their hand. Tucker Carlson going to Russia and cooing, while really it's a societal catastrophe demographically and health-wise, shows how stupid they are. You want to pretend this is about making America great, not trashing the USA. And that's it. As Noah Smith here says, Tucker Carlson went to Russia and was wowed by what he saw, but in reality Russia is a dysfunctional, violent, irreligious, middle-income country with widespread poverty and relatively weak family ties. It's absolutely the antithesis of what many like Tucker Carlson think it is, because they see, Putin making some moves on like anti-LGBT policies and traditional family values, and it's wonderful. Actually, their church attendance is very poor. I mean, I'm saying this as a secular person, but their church attendance is actually really poor. You might think they're a religious country by the kind of rhetoric that's coming out, but they empirically aren't. Crime is a problem. It's dysfunctional. It's not the place you'd want to be necessarily. I'm sure it's got lovely areas as well, and tar with the same price. But actually, Tucker Carlson waxing lyrical about a cheap grocery bill is the heart is the exemplar of shit journalism. Like the guy keeps being called a journalist. I'm more of a journalist than that box of swear words, lots of swear words. Anyway, he's then gone to, I know this is like a whole Tucker Carlson segment, but he's just all in the news at the moment. He's gone to this
I'll use the devil's advocate.
But advocate
summit.
Yes.
What the frick is he doing talking at the World Government Summit? Like, who's invited him?
You should challenge in the rules of an interview, and you're a master in your business. It's not for me to give you a lecture about that, but you should challenge some ideas. For instance, you didn't talk about freedom of speech in Russia. You did not talk about Navalny, about assassinations, about the restrictions on opposition in the coming elections.
I didn't talk about the things that every other American media outlet talks about
Why?
exclusively.
Yes, this
because
is my
those are
question.
covered, and because I have spent my life talking to people who run countries in various countries and have concluded the following, that every leader kills people, including my leader. Every leader kills people. Some kill more than others. Leadership requires killing people, sorry. That's why I wouldn't want to be a leader. That press restriction is universal in the United States. I know because I've lived it. Ask my former...
Right. The false equivalence here is absolutely astounding. A false equivalence is when you falsely give a parallel. They kill people in Russia, but we kill people in America. Yeah, okay, there might be the occasional assassination that takes place in another country, like the Iranian general or something like that. But you're not. Like, Donald Trump is an opposition leader, but he ain't in prison yet. And if he does go to prison, that's genuinely on his own stupidity for tax fraud and stuff. And he's not being poisoned, and people aren't falling out windows. Every opposition leader in Russia is either killed, imprisoned, or invalidated from running. How dare he give some false equivalence here? And how dare he say that the US, I'm going to stand up for the US here, God damn it. Like, how dare he say that the US is a parallel to Russia in terms of killing? Oh, everyone kills. It's like justifying murder. It's like, oh, do you know what? Everyone, there are murders in every society, so therefore murder's all right. Yeah, murder's all right. Yeah. Meh.
I've had a lot of jobs, and
You've been sacked a lot, mate, because you're crap.
I've done this for 34 years, and I know how it works. And there's more censorship in Russia than there is in the United States, but there's a great deal in the United States. And so,
There's a great deal in the United States of censorship. Is there? What do you mean by that? Detail that for me, because you can't even use the word war in public in Russia. You're not allowed to lay flowers at a memorial to commemorate political deaths. You're not allowed to do anything in Russia. You get locked up. You can't protest on anything, right? It's disgusting that he's giving this false equivalence. I mean, if I was listening to him and that guy, I mean, I get really annoyed when people interview people and just don't push back. It's just like, hang on, mate. No, we ain't going on any further until you justify what you just said. Because to my ears, it is class A, like the finest grade BS.
at a certain point, it's like people can decide whether they think, what countries they think are better, what systems they think.
Yes, they can decide it, right? And they can use evidence to decide that and data points, and they can decide that Russia sucks. That's what they decide if they've got their head screwed on. You, Sunshine, either don't have your head screwed on or someone is paying you handsomely. Or, as I say, both.
I just want to know what he thinks. That was the whole point.
Yeah.
No, the whole point is self-aggrandizement and money, no doubt. So lots of people are going to town on him, saying leadership requires killing people. And, the idea, he's almost like, by implication, really, the inference I make is that he's kind of justifying Navalny being killed, if indeed Navalny was killed, or dying at least. Just, honestly, he's a bad man. The head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, Kirilo Budanov, knows who is behind the poisoning of his wife Mariana. So his wife was poisoned by Russia. Oh yeah, because Russia killed people. That was it. He said this in an interview with the French publication Liberation. So he knows who's behind it. Now, he wants some revenge. So this could be a little bit of Budanov killing people. But do you know what? I don't know how I'd think if my partner was attempted to be murdered. I wouldn't be too happy with that. I think that in the near future, he says, you will see appropriate actions on Russian territory and everyone will understand it. I love his cryptic quotes like that. I don't know what he's referring to, but yeah, something. Ooh. But then possibly nothing. Who knows? Anyway, that's enough about Tucker Carlson and me ranting about him, and goodness me, I could rant for an awful long time. Just to give you an indication of a video I'm going to be doing in the next week, there's someone who's contacted me who's a viewer who has a philosophical background. He said, have you seen the Candace Owens video of her singing the praises of Tucker Carlson's interview? It's absolute abject nonsense and it really needs debunking. Can you do it? And I was like, yeah. And then I watched the first 50 seconds and I stopped it. I was like, I texted him back saying, I've just thrown my phone across the Costa in Warsaw Airport. I hadn't, but like 53 seconds of that video and I was like enraged. So I said, look, let's do this together. So we're going to do a video this week. This guy I've never spoken to before, but he's contacted me. We'll see how it goes. He's watched it and prepared some stuff. I'm just going to do it on the fly because that's how I roll. That's Candace Owens. If you know Candace Owens as I do, goodness me, I won't sidetrack this on a Candace Owens rant. I'm not her biggest fan. Let me say that. I put her in the same category as broadly Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, etc., etc. So whatever. But anyway, she's basically being a Putin apologist, and that needs unpicking, and I'm going to do it. So if you want to listen to someone get probably a little bit angry, watch that video later this week, possibly on Monday, next week. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.